appreciate it. We appreciate it. The purpose of these superstar sit downs is to feel very much like this. Everybody's seated and kind of having an open discussion with a guest, and today's is Mark Stepanian, which is awesome. I'll give a very quick intro to Mark, and then Dean, if you want to add on to this, that would be outstanding. Sure. I guess I know Mark originally through Dean, very close buddies and close hunting buddies today for sure. But I did a little internship at Loveland Distributing where Mark was the president for quite some time. The winter of my senior year of college, I believe it was, hauling kegs, and that was pretty good times. Great job. Yeah. And my brother-in-law Lane worked for Mark for quite some time until Loveland sold, and now Lane has moved with my sister to Indianapolis, then Greenville, and now in Nashville, which I'm very personally pumped about. I think it's awesome. But the Stepanian family owned Loveland from 1958 to 2018, I believe, until Mark led the sale of the company. So Dean, if you want to add on to that anymore before we ask Mark some questions, that would be great.
Well, Ben had to get fired. He was confused rather than being an intern. He thought he was a taster. Let him go. But no hard feelings, obviously. You can see that. So I met Mark when I was working at Hampton Sydney. Before I was a real estate guy, I was an admissions guy at Hampton Sydney, and I had just graduated. And there was a football camp, and they had been trying to coach us on giving presentations about the college and whatever else. And so my first trial run of my super presentation was going in and talking to the kids that were at the football camp. So go in there, and there's this little dude, sort of much chubbier than this version of this guy right now. And he's sitting there, and I'm giving my spiel, and I could tell he was buying into it. He was pretty excited about it. And then he wound up coming to Hampton Sydney, and I guess we just became friends as he was. I'm 5 years older, so his freshman year is my first year out, like I said. And then when we had our first child, we had nothing major, but there was some complications, and so we had to be around the NICU for a while, and then we came home. That was been your senior year, and he and his buddy Brian Rollison had put a banner across the driveway and somehow broken into our house and put balloons and all sorts of stuff like welcome home and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of times people give college kids a bad rap. So fast forward, Mark is third generation in this business, and has a great story to tell, and has seen the business change, and has had to work in to his role, and then sort of develop the business and take it in some different avenues, sort of fight through and trudge through some challenges that have come along, seen a lot of different economies. But really, and I think he'll tell you this, their business, he's not a real estate agent, never sold real estate, but they're in a service business as we are. And I think Benjamin and I have been talking about how can we bring a little different perspective into this sort of forum, and then how can we apply that to what we do after hearing stories like what we're going to hear from Mark and answer some questions. So Mark, thank you for being here. We'll let you have the floor and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we can open it up for some questions.
So I have had the pleasure of knowing a lot of people in hometown for quite a long time. I mean, I grew up out in Studley, and I don't really remember a time when I didn't know the Chenault family, and then I've known Todd and his family through multiple different avenues, from Stonington High School to Hampton Sydney, and then knowing Dean like I have for years, and several other people around the table. So, they talked about having superstar speaker series. Every one of those people must have been busy, so you got me. Right. So I'll try to make this as entertaining as we can. My story is, I'm a Richmond kid who I was going to be a lawyer. Okay, so I go to Hampton Sydney, and I decide that I'm going to go to law school, and I start taking my LSATs. My test scores were really underwhelming as a constant theme of my education. And so I was working to get into law school, and I was working part-time for my father and my grandfather. My grandfather started the company, and he did a brilliant thing. My dad made me work for the summer with our corporate lawyers at Williams Mullen downtown in the Big Tower, and I hated every minute of it. And I'll never forget, our lawyer looked at me and said, "Why are you going to do this?" Because there's at the time 16,000 lawyers in Richmond, and there's only 2 beverage distributors. Why are you going to do this? And so that really resonated with me, and so I set my sights on our family's company. And the family's company began as an underdog, okay? We had absolute no reason to succeed other than good fortune and hard work, period. My grandparents were immigrants. They came here through Ellis Island, ended up in Richmond. You know, I don't want to overplay that card because I'm the luckiest guy in the world, but had they not done that, and Stepanian is an Armenian name, okay? And so the Armenian side of the family fled the Armenian genocide. The Turks invaded Armenia, slaughtered those people. They fled. We lost family members. They ended up here. My grandfather, as a young man, grew up working in his parents' confectionery, and then he, believe it or not, went to work selling beverages. If you remember being around Richmond, or you ever heard about True Aid and those old soft drinks, he sold those way back when. And then he worked as the manager of the National Theater at 7th and Broad. Well, upstairs was a theater. Downstairs, particularly at a certain period of years way back when, known as Prohibition, was a speakeasy. So he was a bootlegger back then, and that got him the connections to get into the alcohol business. People used to ask him, well, did you get in the beer business when they repealed Prohibition? And he used to say, I think it was a day or two before. And so that got us into the business, and he worked in a variety of different ways, worked for several breweries, and then he went to work for this guy named Loveland. And within a year of basically founding this business with one station wagon, Mr. Loveland became ill, got out of the business, no family members that wanted it. So my granddad buys this thing. And he never wanted to put our name on it because, as he said, no one could say it or spell it, and no one cared anyway. And so he left it as Loveland, and that's what ultimately became our company. And so we had one station wagon and two brands. We had Carling Black Label and True Aid soft drinks. That was what we started with. And there's really no reason why Fortune smiled on us other than they were determined and they went to work. And so I started there working in high school with all my buddies, and when you got high school buddies that want to go work in your dad's beer warehouse, it's the coolest place on earth, right? And should we tell some of those stories about when you were the dean and we were taking field trips? Maybe we'll leave those out of the conversation. But so I worked my way through there. Again, thought I was going to go to law school, and then I committed myself to the business. And I had to do this many times, but I go to Hampton-Sydney. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go to law school, but I'm going to work here now. I've got a college degree. I'm ready. Where's my corner office? Well, Dad gave me 3 uniform shirts with my name on them, and he assigned me a sales route only if I got my CDL by the time I was ready to start work. So I went to work after college driving a truck, and he made me start at the very bottom. And at the time, again, not the brightest bulb on the tree. I'm thinking, why am I doing this? You've paid for my education. Well, I was so thankful of that at the end, because there was not a single job around that company that I hadn't touched over the years, and I knew how it had to be done, and I knew what needed to be done, and had done it. And so when Dean asked me to do this, I thought, well, what possible message could I have for anyone that does what you do? And at the end of the day, whether you're selling beverages or selling real estate, you're salespeople, right? And when I thought about it, I said, well, I'm always fascinated by family business stories. Whether it's Hometown Realty, Loveland Distributing Company, Seaworth Lumber, you name it. I was just, if you're familiar with Lansing Building Products, I was having coffee with one of the Lansings the other day, talking about how they grew their company. And it's just amazing the effort that goes into building these great businesses. And so when I thought about this, I thought about, well, Hometown in a lot of ways is like Loveland. I mean, the way that you from your beginnings with Mrs. Chenault to the way that the business has grown now and how big you are, let's face it, Hometown didn't have to succeed either, right? I mean, you all were the underdog. And what I think about our company and the reasons we were successful were the effort and the people, period, end of story. Did we think we did a pretty good job giving direction and accountability and making good decisions? Sure. But without the right people and the effort from those people, it never would have mattered, it never would have materialized. And so what happened was I went to work there, we started growing the business, and in the beverage business, with the alcohol business, you have these weird federal guidelines about territories and the way that brands can access the marketplace because of Prohibition. because back then there was so much illicit business done. It was vertically integrated, but the brewers would control the retailers and the distributors all the way down to the consumer, and it was all under the table dealing. So they did away with all that, and there's strict separation of these tiers of the marketplace. And so we started going about marketing ourselves to new brewers and new territory, and trying to pick up and just organically grow out of our, you know, 2-brand house, True Aid and Carling. When I sold it in 2019, we represented about 200 breweries, and we had everything from Red Bull to bottled water to iced tea to, I mean, you name it. We had about 20-some hundred products in our warehouse at the time when we sold the business. And so I went about, once I learned the business, I went about learning the business through my own eyes, not watching it through my dad's eyes or my grandfather's eyes as I grew up. And we started growing, and we were very successful. Nobody cared about little old Loveland when we were just, you know, the city of Richmond and the 7 or 8 surrounding counties. But then all of a sudden we grew to we were pretty much covering the majority of the state of Virginia. Then all of a sudden what happened, we made a acquisition in Northern Virginia in 2016, and I'm sure there is the same thing in real estate, but there was a electronic newsletter that went out every day called Beer Business Daily across the country. Well, that acquisition broke in Beer Business Daily. Well, the next phone call I got was from the family that ended up buying us 3 years later. And what happened was we had grown big enough. They were the largest beverage distributor in the country at the time. Now the people that Benjamin's brother-in-law works for, because of our presence up and down 95, they had set their sights on the Mid-Atlantic, and you can't effectively sell in the Mid-Atlantic without I-95. And so with that, we had to make a decision about, well, they're coming to the marketplace, and at the time, they were a $50 billion a year private enterprise. And so we knew that when they came, it was going to be with full strength, and it was going to be difficult for us. While we were a nice mid-market, big mid-market beer distributor or beverage distributor, it was nothing in comparison to what they could bring to bear in the marketplace if they wanted to. And so I made the painful decision after a lot of hand wringing, and Dean certainly knows this because he and I talked about it a lot. I made the decision to sell the business, and it was done for the right reasons at the right time. And you know, people ask me, and I have a point to this. People ask me, well, do you miss the business? And it's not really it's a kind of a loaded question, because I don't miss the beer business. The beer business changed so dramatically over the years, where you had, before it was basically us dealing with mom and pop local decision points, to where we were dealing with buying offices in Bentonville, Arkansas for Walmart. And then on the other side of the coin was, instead of dealing with brewers that we grew up with, that we knew were our friends, there's major global mergers and acquisitions at the brewer level, and Wall Street investment bankers were running these brewers, and it was impossible. And so I don't miss that aspect of it, but what I miss is our people, and what I miss is our culture that we built, that we controlled. And so my point to all this is, when I think about hometown, what we used to always say to our people, and I'm trying to dumb it down for the sake of time, is like, you know, in the beer business it was basically divided on the lines of the Anheuser-Busch network and then the Miller Coors network. And we were Miller Coors and everything else. I mean, we had Corona, Yuengling, Guinness, Sam Adams, I mean, you name it, you know, all the White Claws and all those brands, we carried all of those. And while we didn't have, you know, Long and Foster and Ruth Martin Farmville and all these other companies, we had whatever came in the other major network. And where our battles were won and lost is, so if Coors Light and Miller Lite were our primary bread and butter, the competition was Bud Light. And while you may like Bud Light, you may not like Bud Light. It may not be your taste profile. Obviously, we hated it. We were bred to sell against it. But nobody would make the mistake to say that was not a viable quality alternative to what we sold, right? And the dirty secret is probably half the damn beer drinkers, if they close their eyes, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference, right? Now, I know a few people here in the room, as much beer drinking as I've done with them, they'd be able to tell the difference, but for the most part, people wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So the only means by which we had to separate ourselves was our service. And we had to do it right. And every time, the blocking and tackling of our business was that we overserved our customers so that the next time they thought of anything to do with their beverage category, we wanted to be the first person they thought of, the first stop, whether it was advice to, the best visual is you walk down an aisle in the grocery store, you walk down an aisle in the convenience store and you look at the beer case. There's it's a kaleidoscope of colors and package sizes and you get 12-pack, 6-pack, 24-pack, every different kind of style, every different kind of brand in the world. And that's where we did it. That was our competition every single day. So whether that retailer wanted to have that space reset and remarketed to showcase certain products, we had a department literally that drew those plans to scale for convenience store, grocery stores, all those things. Whether it was that, whether it was their 4th of July beer display program, we wanted them to think about us and showcase our brands, because on the back end, we wanted that they got the service they deserve from our company. And so day in and day out, that's how we won, because there were a lot of alternatives. There were a lot of ways to lose. You don't think about it, but you go up to the tap, you go into a bar and you order, hey, what's on tap? And you look up there, well, that's the marketing for us. And we needed to have availability and the proper point of sale support, so that when consumers were making their buying decisions at the bar or at the grocery store, hopefully they think about our brands because they were there, merchandised properly in the proper place to get consumer attention. And so we knew that, it's pretty simple. You go deliver a case of Bud Light, you deliver a case of Miller Lite, it ain't that much different. And maybe the retailer doesn't care, but it was what we did over and above just the delivery transaction. We tried not to make our business transactional. We tried to make it more than just a transaction, because anybody can do that. And it's funny. I've got a lot of friends that Dean knows this, and a lot of those Ruth Martin boys, I grew up with them, went to school with them, and so I know that they've got a lot of people doing what you do. And at the end of the day, and Dean and I talked about this, can you go online and probably get a transaction done to sell a house or buy a house? Sure. So why would it matter to come deal with you guys? And that's what we used to ask ourselves all the time, is why does a customer want to deal with us as opposed to what reasons are we giving him or them to buy from us, to ask us to merchandise their store, to ask us to set their display plan for the summer, to give us the tap space behind the bar, all of those things, why? And it all came back to our service. And the thing, bringing it back to what I said earlier, the thing I missed is the culture that we've built, and knowing hometown like I do, and knowing a lot of folks who work in this business with you all, it's the same thing I see here. It's the family, the culture that you all build, and from what I know that you all strive to do every single day, it's to just don't make it transactional. Is the only thing I would say that is every bit applicable in our business versus yours. Is, at the end of the day, when you close a sale, are they going to want to come back and deal with you again? Because one thing that people always laughed about in our business, the lottery would kill us. When the huge lottery jackpot would go way up, if a drywall contractor is going home from his job and he's going to pick up his 6-pack or his 12-pack, but he's going to take a chance and win $100 million or whatever it is, our business would tank when the lottery would go way up. And so people used to laugh like that, or when the Irish Festival in Church Hill gets rained out, well, you don't sell twice as much the next day. You know, it's like fishing trips, airplane seats, beer business, probably real estate. People aren't gonna go and buy this twice as much the next day if they miss a chance to make the sale. And so we always were looking for a reason for them to want to deal with us. And I guess for you all, if I was in here and you asked my opinion and said, look, why, once you close this sale, are they gonna wanna come back here versus going somewhere else? And so that's what we did. And when we sold the business, we had, I don't know, I guess just under 400 people there. And by and large, it is the absolute most important thing I ever did was to work on that culture and on those people, to have the right people properly trained, held accountable in their positions that shared the same vision for customer service that we did. I mean, and did we make mistakes? Absolutely, all day. It happens. But when we did that, you know, I wasn't necessarily upset that we made the mistake. It's that we just understand why we made the mistake and we fix it then so we won't make the same mistake over and over again. And that, to me, was by and large the kind of components that built the kind of customer service that we were known for. And the most validating part of what I did, I never thought I'd ever sell that business, and I did not want to, but it was, as I said, the right call, was I still today have customers that come up to me and say, oh God, we don't know how good we had it when you know, you all were there doing what you did. And again, that to me is the biggest compliment, not to me, but to our people, because there were so many people, including Ben's brother-in-law, who just did it right every single day when no one was looking, because they understood that to be something beyond just a transactional business, we had to go the extra mile because we had, you know, major competition. I mean, I don't care if you're a beer drinker or not, Anheuser-Busch is a pretty formidable organization to work against. And when they set their sights and their resources on a particular issue or marketing campaign, you better buckle your chin strap, because it's a pretty tough bunch. And we just always tried to maintain that underdog mentality and not ever lose sight of the fact that our customers didn't have to deal with us. They just didn't. And yeah, I mean, well, if you want Miller Lite, they got to deal with you. The grocery store had to buy for me if I wanted Miller Lite, but the consumer could do whatever they want. And they didn't have to pick it up. You know, when my wife goes shopping in the Kroger, she can pick something else, right? And so that's why we wanted to make sure that we always understood that, you know, they had choices, and that we needed to make sure that it was us. So I hope that gives you a little 50,000 foot view to what it is we did. I mean, I'll shut up and answer questions, but you know, I think when Dean and Ben and I talked a little bit about it this week, I said there's a lot of similarity there in what we do and what you do, because you know, there's certainly a lot of choices to go buy a house, right, or sell a house, and you got to give them a reason to want it to be you over and over and over again. And I guess more importantly for you all is to go tell their buddies the great experience that they had dealing with hometown. And I mean, I know a lot of you folks, and I know that your network is really, really a powerful tool in your business. And without that, I mean, it wouldn't be as powerful as it is without great experience. And you know, the thing that I saw in our business that I think is too much today, people try to make it too impersonal, and it's just a transaction. It's just you know, it's just business. Well, if you care about your customers and you care about, I mean, we were lucky that our business started in Richmond. We were born, bred, raised, worshiped, schooled in Richmond, and we gave back. I mean, Stokes and I have been partners in fundraising organizations around this town for 20 some years now. And that made a difference, because I think the community saw our name attached to a lot of things that made the community a better place. And so it was just one more thing that we felt like made it not as impersonal for us, because we did care a lot about the community. So I hope that gives you a little bit of overview to what it is we did. And you know, we were a lot of things. We were a sales company, we were a trucking company. You know, we ran a couple hundred tractor trailers every day. We were a marketing business. we were a warehousing logistics operation, and all of that had to work together. And that was a challenge internally, and I'm not sure you have this same problem, although probably getting things done is always an operational challenge in businesses. But we could have salespeople that could go out and write orders for every case of product in the building. But then all of a sudden, if the fleet management people didn't have the fleet well serviced and operational when we needed it, it didn't matter about the sales. And then that would just, you're talking about ruin our reputation. The salesman's got to go explain to his or her customers why the stuff is not there on time when they're willing, we placed the order and we're going to pay for it, and then can't get it. Sorry, why? Because the truck didn't start? That's not something they want to hear. And then, so if you got the fleet operational, you got the sales team doing what they do, and on the back end, you've got warehouse fulfillment people that are literally working 24/7. If those folks, and let's face it, I don't think many of those guys and girls went to their high school guidance counselor and said they wanted to be a night fulfillment person in a beer warehouse. I mean, a lot of those folks were doing that because they had to, and they really didn't have many other options. And so we had to learn how to really make them feel like they're a part of this team, and make them feel like they were crucial, because they absolutely were crucial. There was no way for our business to the proverbial spoke in the wheel when all of a sudden sales are on time, fleet ops is running what they're supposed to be doing, and then fulfillment that shuts down. Just that complete, well synced up machine had to run. And so we not only spent a lot of time focused on our external relation with our customers, but making sure that department understood just how valuable and important they were, or the whole works would stop. And we, probably more so than anybody, and it's because of our involvement for so many years, Stokes knows that he knows a lot of our people, and we had some really, really good people that worked for us. And I'm proud that we had several multiple generational families that came to work for us, and their kids worked for us, and a couple cases their grandkids worked for us. And that was, I felt like we certainly were doing something right, or that wouldn't have been the case. And then, when we sold the business, I walked away from the deal for probably 6 months, because their quote was, well, we don't let the seller control the HR ranks. And I said, well, see you later. And I walked away, and then they were quiet for about 6 months, and I was like, oh shit, maybe I really messed up. And in about 6 months and a day, they called, they said, are you really gonna mess this deal up potentially over your employees? And I said, well, I'm gonna ask you the same question, because you courted me. This business was not for sale. You came to me, and you have been persistent over about 2 years now of badgering me to sell you this business. I said, how can you think you can come in here from Chicago and replace the team that made us attractive to you to begin with? How are you going to replace them with someone that doesn't know the market, that doesn't know the customers, that does not have all the years of blood, sweat, and tears in the marketplace? And so I was most proud. They didn't hire 4 of our employees after their own ranking system. They had a 1 to 5 ranking system they developed, and our agreement was they didn't have to hire anybody less than a 3. But they had to justify why they thought I was less than a 3, or Dean was less than a 3, or whatever. And number 1, we didn't have any less than 3s, not one in the whole company. And number 2, they didn't hire 4 of our people, and I'm not making light of this because they were crucial importance, but those 4 worked in our accounting department. And the good news is, they had their own accounting department, and that's where they gained so much efficiency in these acquisitions. And because of that specialized skill, we were able to help those people find employment and do things in other businesses. And so my team, for the most part, is still there running the business for this behemoth organization today. And I think that's just a compliment to the kind of culture that we fostered and that they worked hard to maintain. And I know how many cookouts and band functions, and I remember years ago, whether it was Rodney and Mike and Dean, and they were doing site agent work, cooking pork butts on the grill for their customers, and all of those things that if this was me running hometown instead of Loveland would have been exactly what we felt like that we did to make it a heck of a lot more than transactional business. So I could go on for days because I am passionate about what we did, but I'll pause if anybody has any questions. I mean, I hope that is of some interest to you. But you know, that's the story from a small little company that turned into something that was, in my mind, pretty special because we had our fingerprints all over it, and it did a lot of good things for a lot of our employees as well as the community.
Mark, you talk about the effort and the people, and I can speak firsthand to the people. I mean, obviously, Lane, I mean, without you, my sister would not be in as great a stand as she's in, so I'll be forever thankful for you for that. But I mean, still to this day, I still talk to JP LaJoy, Bubba Colgan, Brad Strawn. Brad's parents, I sold their house years ago. So it's just been cool having those relationships. But you build like these fierce brand loyalists out of these guys who just want nothing but the best for the company. Even if I've seen Lane like chuck somebody's full cooler of beer of Bud Light into the river, like will not tolerate Bud Light or Lane Beverly. But you talk about community, and that's just such a huge part of what Loveland did. And once again, like we had the significant house fire in 2012, and all of these guys showed up at the hospital. I'd known them for like 3 months. That wasn't a part of their job description for these guys that I just met at a little internship to come show up at the hospital to see us. How do you encourage so much community through these guys when it's outside of what their job really requires? Or I guess it does require it to work at Loveland.
Well, that was one of the things I hated when we got bigger, because it just got harder. I mean, I'd say the quick answer to your question is we tried to always make it personal. I mean, you know, you're driving a beer delivery truck in Richmond, July heat. You know, they'd laugh for years and years. It was the 255 air conditioners in those trucks, 2 windows down, 55 miles an hour, and then you got to stop and unload all that beer and listen to the backroom delivery manager at Kroger complain because that pallet's 2 feet from where it should be. And these guys they'd have tough days. And so, example is on those days. I mean, I think you probably should know this because I think probably some similarities here. 57% of our business was done between March Madness and Labor Day. I mean, when March Madness hit and the weather warmed up and the Irish Festival happened and people were, you know, spring fever hit and they wanted to get outside or get to the bars, that's when it started. And then you think about the 3 major summer holidays, Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, and then Richmond for years, not like it now, but it used to be that way. We had the benefit of 2 extra bookend summer holidays, which were Richmond Race Weeks. Back when NASCAR was 100,000+ people at the Richmond Raceway, and it was literally a week-long celebration in Richmond. And they were like Super Bowl weeks for us. And then you think about the rest of the time in there, that's when everybody else, that's when you're at your river house, in your backyard barbecues, when people were off enjoying themselves, that's when we were the busiest. And so when those days were hot and long for those guys, it was the little things. Ben, to answer your question, we'd be there, our management team would be there cooking hot dogs and burgers and giving them cool towels and Gatorades, you know, at the end of their shift. And they were bringing the trucks in. We'd be there in the mornings. You know, my wife will tell you there was more than one time when I'd leave and we'd figure out how to get pizzas made at 2 o'clock in the morning to give the night shift, and we roll up in the warehouse and just make them feel part of something. And this is I've done a little bit of work recently with a couple of startup companies, and a guy was talking to me about the productivity in his order fulfillment center, and I walked in there and it was as sterile and everybody was walking around like with their head down, picking orders. And nobody was just, it was a transactional function. It was let me get my job done and get out. And I said, well, let me just give you an example of what we did. Again, night warehouse pickers, okay? Not usually highly educated folks, but passionate if you figured out what made them click. So we went in there, we're like, okay, so Suzanne likes country music, Adrian likes gangster rap, and Stokes likes yacht rock, okay? Well, we'd say, all right, well, those 3 teams, we divide you up in teams on your fulfillment shift, and then we track it over a period of time. We'd say, all right, let's look at Suzanne's team's efficiency and mistakes, okay, and attendance, and the winner, we wired the warehouse for sound. I mean, I had speakers in there like damn nightclub, and little things, they got to pick the tunes for the month. And I mean, I've never done anything so simple that got such a great result, because it turned a monotonous, hot, sterile environment into something pretty fun. And then all of a sudden what we had was, you know, Adrian's giving Suzanne hell because he doesn't want to listen to country, and Suzanne would say, well, you know, if you pick your ass up next month, maybe we wouldn't have this. And so that bred competition in that whole segment, and next thing you know, we're watching them gel back there as a family. And so I think those are things that we did that made those folks actually care, because, you know, my dad one time, forever, you couldn't have beards in our business. It was like, my dad and my grandpa, no beards. I'm like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So I take over, I buy the company from my father in 2004. I thought, I'm gonna take over. It's like, all right, first thing I'm gonna do, new rule, beards. You'd have thought I gave everybody like a $10,000 raise. I mean, they just were so excited. And so we just felt like, and we tried to live this, if people, unfortunately, this day and time, to be a success, you're gonna spend more time at work than damn near you do at home. And if there are ways that we can make that that workplace work for you, feel better for you, then you're gonna give a better effort and you want more to be a part of it. And then I think that's why we had so many people that still to this day are loyal to that company. It was because of, they just felt a part of it. We made them feel like it truly was their business, and we couldn't do it without them. And so we wanted to make them feel like it was something special for them. And those are just little examples of things that we did to make them really buy in. And we got we got a level of productivity out of those folks that arguably we shouldn't have, because they cared, and they thought it was pretty cool to pick out the tunes. And I mean, we'd give them, if Ben's team had fewer mistakes than Dean's, it might be we'd raffle off a flat screen TV for every week you got less than X mistakes, and they just bought in. And I think that's really why. And
yeah, it's awesome.
Mark, what do you do with your time now?
Well, I'm trying to get up every morning by at least 11. No, that's another long question. I didn't finish our deal until August of 2019, and honestly, the buyers wanted me to stay. They offered me a position amongst all the other stuff I've done. For 9 years, I ran our state's distributor association. So part of that was lobbying the General Assembly, because it's such a highly regulated business. And so the buyer wanted me to stay on and run their lobbying for them. And I decided that, primarily because of what I told you earlier, once I had secured the future of the balance of our employees, the majority of our employees, I needed to get out of the way, because the new owner, you buy my house tomorrow, you're gonna change a color, or you're gonna change something about it. And I knew that they were, with their basically nationwide system that they ran, they weren't gonna do it the same way that we did it. It would be unfair for my employees to come to me and say, well, why can't we do it the way we used to do it? So I needed to get out of the way. And so I left in August of 19 on the advice of some mentors of mine. They said, look, don't do anything for a couple of months, because you're gonna be just cooked. I've got 4 children, and they're like to hunt and fish and play lacrosse. So I didn't do anything for 19, and then all of a sudden 2020, COVID hits. And that was really strange for somebody who was used to getting up and going to work early in the morning, sitting at home. And at the end of 20, I was looking hard to find another, I had to kind of figure out what I think I'm good at. And I hate that kind of self-praise, but I feel like I'm an operator based on all the stuff we've talked about. And I found my way to a pretty cool little business. It was actually based down in Williamsburg. And we put it under contract. It had a great team. It needed money, direction, and mostly energy. And awesome little team. And 2 months before we were supposed to close it in 2021, one of their facilities up in Rona, we found a significant environmental problem. And I failed because we couldn't come to terms on it, and I didn't want all that possible exposure. And so that was 21, and then 22, I've spent looking at a lot of opportunities, but not very many good ones. So I'm still trying to figure out what to do, and that's a mystery. I do a bunch of charity work. Again, my partner is sitting right there. We've got a brain tumor. My wife lost 2 family members, a younger brother and her mother, to brain cancer. Stokes lost his sister-in-law and his mentor, his football coach, to brain cancer. So years ago, our family, another Richmond family that I don't think you care, the Markell family, and my father-in-law, we developed a business model with Duke University. Duke's one of the preeminent brain tumor facilities in the nation, and we wanted brain tumor resources for Virginia. And so we built a business model, and we built out a brain tumor quality of life center. It's actually at Bon Secours, it's in St. Mary's. And so I spent a lot of time with Stokes working on that. We do all the fundraising for that center. We're on their board. And then hope I get plenty of time to go hunting and fishing or whatever else we can go. Once he gets off the crutches, we'll be back in business. So that's a long answer to a short question, but I don't know what I would do if I was still working, because I find myself busy as can be, but it's just not what I'm used to. So
Thank you.
and if anybody wants to hear more about the Brain Tumor Center, you got the man right here in house. We love some help there, and or most importantly, it's quality of life cancer resources for more than just brain cancer. So if anyone, unfortunately, probably more of us than I know or care to say have been affected by that disease. So please know you've got a resource right here at hometown if you need anything, or you know of anyone that needs anything in that world. We're happy to help there. We've been lucky, we worked hard and been fortunate, so we felt like it was our obligation to give back to our community through that center. And your compadre there has been a big help putting the points on the board, raising a lot of money for that thing. So
Job, Stokes.
I can tell you as a customer, because we were customer first, and friends some miraculous way later, but as a customer of the Churchill Irish Festival going back 40 years, we dealt with the Anheuser-Busch Company. And when I got more involved in it with my wife and her family, who were lifelong members there, the culture that Mark talks about, the way we were treated one way and the way we were treated by his grandfather and his father, were apples and oranges. And it was more of these people were telling us what we were going to do, which ended pretty quickly when we got involved, as opposed to these people telling us we're here for you. And when Mark talks about service, I mean, they gave great, and still do, great service. Even though the company's changed, the people, the environment that was still there carries on. Yeah, they do different.
sure.
People think about how their company, you think about, oh, you sold 500 kegs of beer. Well, that's great. But
In a day.
They don't, in a day. They don't make on a keg of beer, their company, not hardly anything. And then you add in manpower, beer trucks, all night long working, restocking the kegs, all that kind of thing over a weekend. They probably lost money, but they didn't do it for that. They did it in the beers that Dean and those guys gave away. But they gave so much and still do inadvertently. But it's different now because that company now is more corporate, and so now they are geared more to bringing in outside trucks, that kind of thing. So it's changed, and it's been a loss. We still get good service, don't get me wrong, but it's different, and you can tell it's different. It truly is, and it's a whole lot easier when that customer service changes to say, have a nice day, I'll find somebody else. And to me, that parlays into the business all of us are in. do something that somebody, not a customer don't like, and they're gonna find somebody else pretty easy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I don't think
thank
there's
you.
any difference between what we do and what y'all do.
And Mark, you said, one of the points that really resonated with me is, you know, the options are there. I mean, there's other good real estate companies, other good real estate agents. In fact, there's over 7,000 in our marketplace. I mean, why should they list with us, or in this case, if you make it personal, because we're independent contractors, why should they list with me? And so, you know, you talked about trying to make it personal with your people in the field, whether it be the person who's going to the bar that's servicing the lines or making the delivery at the convenience store or whatever, and keeping an underdog mentality. So the question is really two things. So were there standards? Because obviously you had learned from working in college and in high school and seeing how things were going, but when somebody comes in off the street, when you've got 400 employees, they're not all immediately being able to see it. Were there standards, and what were those standards as far as like punctuality, professionalism, personal, calling people by name, stuff like that, protocol if there were problems? And then how much of it was just watching the other people and getting incorporated into the culture?
Yeah. Well, I think it was both. We, as I said, that was an easier task for us when we were smaller, right? Because I could really affect. I knew everybody's family, and I knew what made you tick. But as we got bigger, I think it was two things. We had identified. We tried to standardize our onboarding. Number one. Number two. Well, I got it backwards. Number one, we really worked hard in our interview process. We were pretty damn stringent when it came to our interview process, and it was kind of a probably a 2 or 3 phase approach, to different departments. And we may have one of our fleet ops guys deal with interview a salesperson. We may have we cross departmentalize so that the candidate as well as the employee, the candidate could say, well, gosh, I mean, why would I care about the fleet ops guy? We wanted everybody to see how much value we placed in multi-departmental cooperation. But then we standardized our onboarding. We did as many of them as we could. We did it in person, where I'd go in and I'd talk to the new candidates about Loveland. And then we had identified a group of people that we wanted them to be around for their training, that we knew the pride and the effort and the pride just poured out of them. And by being around them, on top of, yes, we had standards about punctuality and dress code. And I mean, if you look now at the way the world is since COVID, it's gone totally casual. I mean, I saw a soft drink delivery guy the other day. I was in a Wawa over on Forest Hill. I'm like, I think the guy's here to rob the place. I don't think he was there delivering beverages. And I couldn't have, I had one of my employees ask me one time, when the craft beer thing hit, all the craft dudes are, really laid back, and they got the baggy pants and all this shit. It's like, well, how come we can't do that to look like that? I was like, you can do that if you go work for them. Because our standards are our standards. And one thing that we always said was, when we start to give up the little things, and ultimately the big things are going to be compromised also. And so to me, it was really scrutinizing the interview process. Make sure that, I used to hate when somebody say, hey, we're gonna have to let Adrian go because he's just not getting it. Well, hold on a second. When Adrian and Stokes and Benjamin were hired, did all 3 of them get the exact same onboarding process? Did all 3 of them get the exact same training? Do all 3 of them know because if we invested the time in Adrian and Benjamin, but not in Stokes, and Stokes doesn't fail, well, that's not his fault. And so we just really tried to standardize that. And the problem we faced, particularly when we were growing, was you get busy and you just say, oh, well, I gotta have somebody, hire him and get him in there. Well, that didn't work, because we were putting people into positions that they weren't ready for. And then we were like, well, why did they just piss off the customer? Because they didn't know what to do, and that's not their fault. And so I hope that answers your question. Yes. It was more of a 3-phase approach that I think is what sustained us through that.
So can I ask a question? There were a couple things that you said that I really felt like really connected directly with real estate. Seasonality being one. We also do 30 or 40% of our business in the same 3 or 4 months. Building the culture, brand loyalty, but feeling important. And this is kind of more personal. Because our job isn't something we can do every week, it's something that we might do every 5 years for a certain family or 10, but it's just as important. What's something that someone's done for you recently that made you feel important in your stature?
You mean from
From
customer
anybody? Could have been a
standpoint?
dry cleaner store, it could have been the dealership. Like, was there anybody that in the last month or two that's really stood out? Because we're always looking for new ways to make people feel important. Pop buys, events, client events, mailing them stuff, sending them stuff. Has anyone stood out to you in any of the services that you come across that really, made an impact or made a mental note to you? Because we're always looking for new ways.
Yeah, I think, it's so simple. We had, a banking group that banked our business, different parts of the business, and one of them, has been gobbled up in the big bank. They've merged like 1,000 times.
Yeah.
And to this day, since I sold the company, I haven't heard a word from him, not a word. And one of our other banking partners, for no reason at all, he'll pick up the phone and just say, "Hey, bud, just how's your family? Checking on you. What are you doing? We want to be here for you." And I was a hell of a lot more important to a bank when I had the business and everything that came with it. And this guy treats me exactly the same today as he treated me when I was at Loveland. And I've one of my little team that I have that work, my CFO from Loveland still works for me, and he helps me analyze these business deals we're looking at. And he was talking to me about this. I said, "I'm gonna tell you what, there's no way that I'm going with any bank but them, then X, when we get the next deal in the pipeline," because we were big believers in loyalty on both ends. Whether it was the plumber that would come to Loveland to work on the facilities, the guy cutting the grass at Loveland, we try to give the same loyalty that we wanted from our customers. And we wouldn't, and to this day, I've got a friend of mine, he's in the insurance business, and he used to be, he was joking me, but he never got our insurance business. And we were good friends. His daughter is my goddaughter, okay? But the insurance people that we had dealt with had been with our family for years, decades, and they worked tirelessly to make sure that we got what we need. And with all that equipment running around every day, man, I get up in the morning, exercise, and I'd see all this tractor trailer turned over on 295, and my blood would run cold. Oh my God,
It was mine.
Yeah. And so I never would switch. And I used to tell my buddy, I'm like, look, I can always get a cheaper, or somebody's always going to want to buy the business, but I have no reason to take the business away from these people and give it to you. And just because we're buddies, in this particular case, there's decades of service that have come along with this, and I would really feel bad that if a customer did that to us, I'd wonder, I couldn't have done any more for you. And so, to me, it's just a little thing. This guy picks up the phone and calls me and says how I'm doing. And it's just a personal, he doesn't have to do it because I don't matter to him right now. But I think he's saying, hopefully one of these days I'll figure it out and maybe I will matter to him. And he thinks enough of back to what I said earlier. It's not transactional with him.
Right.
He's trying to make it so that we're more than just, he's not cold calling to see if I want to come bank with him. So I think that's probably the best example of anything recently.
Or it might matter or might not matter. He's still like calling you, just say, "Hey, what's up? How's the family? How you doing?
100%. And
Can I borrow some money?"
one of my best customer relationships, this guy was horrible. And the way that I got trained, it was a bit sinister, because when I started moving up, I didn't work for my dad, I worked for other department heads, and they when I moved into the sales team, they went around to the different sales groups, whether it was grocery, convenience, restaurants, whatever, and they took all the worst customers that we were having the hardest time with, and they gave them all to me. And like, here, you go do this. I'm like, oh God. And it was brilliant, because if I succeeded there, then I think Dad thought I was probably gonna make it. And we had a customer that hated us. And he was, he worked for Anheuser-Busch at one point in time. And so I think a lot of it was this, he was wired to hate everybody else but AB, and then he was in charge, he got put in charge of a large buying group for some convenience stores that did a lot of volume. And he just, I mean, it was brutal. And so I walked in there, and my first thing was, I said, look, you know, you have your perceived notion of what we are and who we are, and it's up to me to change that. And I said, I'm gonna work hard to show you that I want to be your partner here. And the personal side of it was, I walked into his office one day, and he just wasn't right. And his daughter was a cheerleader at Lee Davis High School, and they had identified something wrong, and she kept fainting at cheerleading practice. Well, I just sat down and I just sat there and talked to him about it, because I actually, as a father, I'm like, I'm sorry, you know, and it was like flip the switch. And he told me not long ago, it's like, you know, I never had anybody else come in and actually give a shit about, most people came to office, they wanted to get the order and get out. And he goes, the fact that you sat down and cared, I mean, we built a great relationship to the point where I pretty much controlled his beer category for a long, long time. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think some of the similarities with Hometown and Loveland, knowing you guys, is the hiring process is a little different, but you track the same people, because Mike and Rodney and Todd and Dean, there's no way around it. They work hard, and we see that they work hard, and we know that they had to build up a business just like we built up our business. And same with you. You told me the stories about touching every part of the business, you know, doing every job there. There's no real escaping that, you know, like that attracts people. Well, that guy can work harder than I can too and get success, you know. I think there's a.
Well, Adrian, I said it earlier, there's probably, Rodney, I mean, there's probably a lot of days way back when your mom and the Hometown didn't have to make it, right? I mean, there were probably days when you didn't think it was. And so look at what y'all have put into building this thing that is, you know, you all are held to a pretty damn high standard around this area in real estate. I mean, the Hometown name has a lot of equity in it. And it's, I would think, even though, as Dean said, you're independent contractors, there should be some pride in that. And that's what we tried. We wanted our people to feel like when they saw our logo, there was pride in it, because they made it what it was. And, you know, I guess if you're not talking to somebody every 5 years, maybe it's just like that banker.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty simple.
Well, we're always telling everybody, make calls, make calls, make calls. And it's so funny that you said that's what made a difference, that's how someone showed you that you mattered, because we literally beat everybody over the head with make calls, make notes.
Well, I think salespeople today that are doing it that way are going to kill anybody else. Because I've got my oldest son, he's 23, and he's in medical sales in Charlotte. And most of his buddies are working from home still.
Yeah.
They have no interpersonal skills. They have no discipline. They're like, he's like, Dad, you know, Jimmy gets up he punches into his computer at 10, and he's like done at 3, and he's playing pickleball at like 4:30. I'm like, Nick, all you gotta do is outwork that cat, because he's got no skills that are gonna matter when the world starts to wake up again and is normal. And I just think we've unfortunately gotten so impersonal that what you all do, if you can find any way to make it more so, then you're gonna kill it. I mean, and that's what we always found. It was like, well, once you get somebody motivated to understand that, it isn't that hard, right? I mean, once they understood, then it was easier. And thank God we were able to replicate those, as Stokes kindly said. We replicated that a lot, and that's when we really started growing and made it a lot easier to grow, because we'd buy a company and we would take the best of what the old company did, the best of what our company did, and we merged it into a new deal, and we had enough people there that had enough pride to get it done. And I'm not saying it was right for everybody, but it worked.
I think something that we need to sort of understand, look at it from maybe a different perspective that we're looking at, and how much each of our individual businesses is similar to what he did, and the fact that we're CEOs of our own business, whether you're a team leader, whether you're a team member, or whether you're a sole proprietor, you are the leader. You know, you're the CEO. And a story about Mark that he won't tell is, you know, one of the coolest offices when he was like calling the shots. I used to like to go over there and check it out. And then who was the girl that would work at the front desk was really nice, not like the one at the end, but the one that like, knew who I was. Yeah. So I could go over there when she was there, like then they really got to be like strict, like, oh, well, who are you, sir? I'm like, I didn't like that. But once when they knew who I was, I'd go over there and then she'd be like, oh yeah, Mark's, I'd walk in Mark's office. Mark had a bathroom in his own private bathroom in his office with the shower. Yeah, I mean, you've made it when you got there. You made it. But then there's a closet. So like he's like doing all this on the phone or whatever. I'm like looking around the office trying to find some cool beer stuff or maybe cold beer. And I look in there and there's a shirt that, you know, that says Mark on the shirt. And you know what I think a lot of people don't understand is it doesn't really matter where you are in the business and where you know what you've done. You still have to be willing to put on that shirt and get back down to the basics and get in the trenches, no matter where you are in that. And I think we forget that sometimes is what we do. Maybe we've never done it, but your clients are, you know, those are the unexpected extras. When you're in Mark's world, when he's driving the truck, you know, and running a route when the flu goes through the company and there just aren't any drivers, well, it's got to happen. And not only do the customers see that, but the other employees see that. And you know, that, back to my question about culture, I mean, that's how you build a culture. When you see the leadership taking responsibility and ownership of what's going on. And I think that story should inspire us to maybe look at what we're doing and realize, you know, we need to get out there and do those unexpected things for the clients, whatever it is. If it's moving day and the mover doesn't show up, well, you know, if you got time, maybe spread mulch or take my chainsaw and go cut up a bookshelf that we can't figure out how to get out of the house or whatever else. So that's a testament to who he is. But I think that's sort of a big tip here that I think we can all benefit from. Is it's, you know, you just gotta be willing to give those unexpected extras and understand whether you're the CEO or whether you're the lowest person on the totem pole. You just got to get it done.
Guys, we'll do maybe anybody have one or two more questions. We'll get out of here. We've gone a little over an hour at this point. So one more question.
I've got one. So you mentioned briefly when I guess craft beer became a big thing, and I'm sure throughout your time in the business there were lots of other challenges in the market. How did you continue scaling your business while everything around you was changing? You know, thinking about our inventory issue, our interest rate issue, you know, how did you combat all of those conflicts and grow at the same time?
Well, it's you know, a lot of people don't realize this, but everything we sold, with the exception of probably bottled water, was perishable. It had a code date on it. And so when you got, basically, when it shows up at the loading dock from the brewery, turn the hourglass over and the clock's ticking.
So I got cheap beers during the internship.
Right. That's right. More than I had 8 beer with the Hampton Sydney more than I would have had years ago. But so we had to be cautious of that, and so you had to be pretty certain before you go order trailer loads of whatever the case may be, because, and that's a lot of what I did, is I played poker with my manufacturers, negotiating terms and cooperative agreements. So like if we're going to take a chance on the newest, you know, blueberry IPA, and it's really hadn't been tested in the market all that extensively, okay, I'll buy in, I'll try anything, but you gotta be willing to help me on the back end if things go south, and you just don't, forget my number when I'm looking at 20,000 cases of out-of-date beer, right? And so what happened with us was, across our portfolio, you had, for simplicity's sake, Corona on one end and Milwaukee's Best on the other end. Okay, if you know beer, cheap beer, expensive beer. And then as the craft beer thing started, I mean, one of our biggest years ever was like 2008, right before the housing market collapsed. We were on fire, and we only had 450 products in the market. When I sold it, we had over 2,000. And so when craft beer hit, consumers went kind of haywire, and people talk about it's like lily pad. Consumer was hopping from one lily pad to the other. No, I want this IPA. No, I don't want that. I want this one. No, I want this. And then at the same time, they were going away from the traditional like Miller Lights and Coors Lights of the world, and those brands were slowing down. And so all of a sudden, all that happened, and then all of a sudden, wow, what White Claw, seltzers. I never forget. Truly beat, if you Truly, that beat White Claw in the marketplace, and they brought, Boston Beer Company was going to test Truly in Richmond, and they brought it into our people probably a year before it ever hit the market, and we're taking it like, alcoholic seltzer. Nobody's gonna buy this stuff. And then, boom, that took off. And so, what we decided to do was to grow our business. We had to be, again, to be value added. We wanted to play in every one of those categories. So that years ago, there was a guy in Virginia that built a huge business, and this is gonna draw a laugh from you, but he built a damn big business focusing on inner city beverages. He was selling Colt 45 and Mickey's Malt Liquor and all these brands, and he built one hell of a business that we ended up buying from him. And then we bought the organization we bought in Northern Virginia was all craft beers. We were a big part of negotiating and bringing the Stone Brewery to Richmond, and so we wanted to play in every one of those different categories, but we had to be careful because we could get caught, and you did get caught many times with brands or packages that just didn't work. And so we tried to make sure that we had solid participants in every beverage category, and that we didn't want to be. That's why we bought those other companies, because we can't play in this market. We had nothing to offer. We can't be value added. We can't do anything of substance with our inner city customers or the craft. We just didn't have it. And so that's what we went out to do. And I'm not sure I answered your question 100%, but the way we went about doing it was just to continue to focus on quality brands and quality partnerships, and making sure that we just stayed true to our business model in every one of those categories.
Yeah.
Is that anywhere close to what you're looking for, Abby? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think really to us it just translates back to that service, and I guess expanding, I guess, what we offer to our clients, I guess, as much as in our control. I don't know.
Well, like diversifying, knowing a little bit about all the different loan stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it was easy. It would have been a lot easier business for me to run if we just could have sold Miller Lite, Miller High Life, Corona, and been done with it. But there's no way that we could have grown without diversifying our products. It was a lot harder to sell that, to manage that much. I mean, amongst other things, physically, we had to have a lot more space to manage that kind of inventory, and it just was a problem. But we never would have grown without it. The business would have moved. I guess a better way to answer your question: had we not done that, the business would have moved beyond us,
Right.
because we wouldn't have had anything to offer. And so we had to make a decision. Are we in or are we out? And by virtue of being in, and I think this is probably relevant too, because my grandfather, the guy that gave us the start, he worked till he was 92. He died when he was 93. And so, I mean, the guy had a long run, and try to explain, even though I was running the business, try to explain electronic funds transfer to a 92-year-old, right? I mean, he was arcane in his methods and his ideas about the business. And I mean, I bought a business in Fredericksburg. It was a Red Bull. When Red Bull got hot and came out, I was like, look, people are drinking this stuff by itself. People are mixing it with vodka, and we're losing in the bars and restaurants to this mixer. And so I was like, we gotta figure this out. Either we gotta come up with something on our own, and we looked at all kinds of different options there. And then I said, you can't beat them, buy them. And we went and bought the one up in Fredericksburg. I thought my dad was gonna disown me. He's like, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. No. I was like, well, I'm glad you only have one vote anymore. See you, we're buying it. and then, it went from that, you're the dumbest, I can't believe, you're an idiot, to, wow, what a good movie. That's great. I'm glad you didn't listen. So, had we not made a decision to do that, our business would have been, probably a third of the size it was. And this is pretty cool. I'll say this because I'm proud of it, and they should be as well. When I really knew it was time to sell the company and that they weren't going to go away, I said, there's a lot of people that understand business. I can lay a business case in front of a lot of smart people, this room included, and you can look at it and say, this is what the, A plus B equals C. But not everybody understands family business, and that's a difference. And what we had built and the way that we had built it, it really probably more than it should, I don't know if it should, but it did your heartstrings more than your head. And I was like, I got to be clear with my head instead of just my heart. And I said, well, who in this town that understands that? Well, I'm very lucky because I have served with him on some boards. I was able to talk to Bobby Ucrop. And when I called him up and I said, Matt, pick your brain. And I went over to him and he gave me a lot more time than I thought he would or should. And he really sought to understand